Rise up Bahamas and let your voices blaze.
Bahamas, your Save the Bays team is live on air once a week to give you your environmental update on your country, our beautiful Bahama land. Join us on Voice of the Bays radio show each Wednesday on Love 97 from 5 to 6 p.m. to hear the latest news on our 700 islands in the sun. Call in and let your voice be heard during the show. Calling from Nassau, dial 326-8255. Calling in from Freeport, use 351-6175. You can also listen to the show streaming online.
Let's save the Bays.
The content of Voice of the Bays radio show is the property of Save the Bays, Coalition to Protect Clifton Bay, and is intended for general information purposes only. The views expressed by the show hosts or their guests are their own, and not that of Love 97. To learn more about Save the Bays, please visit their website at www.savethebays.bs or find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Our thanks, Bahamas, for your support.
Rise up Bahamas, let your voices blaze. Stand up Bahamas, come on, let's save the Bays. Clifton Bay, save it. Breakers Bay, save it. Bimini Bay, save it. Let's save the Bays. Rise up Bahamas, let your voices blaze. Stand up Bahamas, come on, let's save the Bays. God gave us this land, and this land we must save. Stand up Bahamas, come on, let's save the Bays.
Good afternoon, Bahama land, and welcome to the Voice of the Bays. The environment speaks. And the environment, of course, includes everything that's on top of the belly and the bosom of Mother Earth, and everything that's in her plethora, our wide expanse of ocean and water. And this afternoon, we're going to talk about that incredible scenery, which those of us who have had the privilege and the courage to dive under the water, we're able to see. And I'm talking about the coral reefs, which is absolutely necessary for the survival of the planet and our people. You know, I want to introduce the show by giving a little thing. You know, I like our former Prime Minister, Honorable Perry Christie. And last year sometime we were in, there were a number of us environmentalists who were invited to participate in a discussion about how it would be sensible to put an environmental sensitive operation on two of the keys in the Exuma Keys. And during the discussion, which was led by the then environmental minister, we were talking about all of the negatives that a golf course would do to impact the coral reefs. And halfway through the discussion, our then Prime Minister came in, and of course he knows how vociferous Joseph Dowell has been about our environment, and particularly the coral reefs and the mangroves, etc. And he made reference, he said he was down in Exuma Keys just about 2 weeks before then, and the water was calm, and he got on a boat, a little dinghy, with one of the fishermen, and he floated out over these beautiful coral reefs, and he said, Joe Dowell, when I looked down there and saw what was under that water, I could not believe it. I was struck, I was awed by what he said, and at the same time struck that the leader of our nation, the Prime Minister, had never ever dove into the ocean to see what's at the bottom of this magnificent planet of ours. And so, you know, I hope now the Prime Minister and former Prime Minister, now that he has a lot of free time, he would take a trip down Exuma Keys, learn how to scuba dive, and see all the magnificence under the water, and probably he will regret for having given away the seabed of this beautiful nations, particularly in Bimini, and the mangroves, in not only him, but the former Prime Minister too. Hubert Ingram started the nefarious idea of selling our mangroves to foreigners to come in. Right at one swoop, they devastated 163 acres of mangroves in North Bimini. That was not only reprehensible, the rape of our environment, but it was absolutely sinful. Sinful. In fact, you know, in the Catholic tradition, we have what we call mortal sin and venial sin, and that was a mortal sin. The mortal sin, if you don't confess it, you're going to go to hell. But anyway, this afternoon, we have a renowned young lady. And I don't know what it is about Joe Dowell. I always attract these beautiful, young, intelligent people, be they, male or female. And they are so, not that I don't like the less intelligent and so forth. They come my way too by the hundreds and the thousands. But so often, the elegant, the informed, the passionate people come my way so that we could have a meaningful discussion about the beautiful environment that has been given to us by the Creator. Something that is awed by the entire universe. And I do not hesitate to show the map of them. In fact, I was in Utah just last week, Salt Lake City. And one of the gentlemen at the desk asked me, where are you from? And I said, from the Bahamas. He said, well, tell me some things about the Bahamas. I've never been there, I've never heard of them. I said, well, let me show you something. So I go and I Googled a map, a satellite map of the Bahamas, and I showed it to him. I said, that is the most beautiful place on the planet. And I said, that doesn't come from Joe Dowell. That came from the astronauts who circled the globe over and over again, and they were to determine where was the most beautiful spot on the planet Earth, and they decided that the Bahamas, the archipelagic nation of Bahamas, was it. And that's why we have a young person like Alana Vellicott trying to maintain the sanctity, the dignity, and the magnificence of our coral reefs. Now, let me give you a little thing about Alana, because her curriculum vitae is so long, it's so involved, so significant. But anyway, she's Bahamian, marine biologist from Grand Bahama, hailing from Grand Bahama, and is currently an undergraduate student studying ecology and biology at South Dakota State University. When Alana was still first going, I think I wrote a reference for you, didn't I?
I believe you did.
Yeah, I did. And I said, South Dakota? Where are you going in South Dakota? All that cold and barren land, but beautiful land nonetheless. My wife is from North Dakota, by the way. Yes, she's from North Dakota, right north of South Dakota.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so Alana was the former Bahamian environmentalist steward scholar. She spent time at the Cape Eleuthera Institute. She's going to talk a little bit about that. And the nonprofit environmental conservation, Cape Eleuthera brief. And there's so many things. She's worked at the National Trust, Bahamas National Trust. She's a scuba diver for 14 years. She participated in fish research, shark research, so many things, Alana. But let's get to the core of this afternoon. Welcome to the Voice of the Bays, The Environment Speaks.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Are you happy to be here?
Yes, I am.
Why are you happy to be here?
Well, first of all, I just came from Abaco, and it's pleasantly pleasant to be in this room with air conditioning, first of all. But no, of course, I've known you since I was a child, and it's just a pleasure to be here on the show with you.
It is so wonderful, and you have done so much. But let's get right into the nitty-gritty. We're talking this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You could call us from Nassau, 326-8255, and Freeport, 351-6176. If you have any comments to make or questions to ask. But we're talking mainly about this magnificent ecosystem under the ocean that so many Bahamians have not ever seen. What are coral reefs and why are they important?
Well, a coral reef is essentially just a limestone structure, but it's not just a rock. It's actually an animal. It's a calcium carbonate structure that's created by coral polyps, which are really small, microscopic animals. They're about no bigger than a pinhead, and they're also covered in coralline algae and they grow over thousands of years. They're really slow growing. And they occur between tropical and subtropical regions, so that's us, the Bahamas, and they grow in relatively shallow waters because they require sunlight, which we will talk about in a minute. No, like I said, they're not plants, they are animals. And they need clean water, and so essentially they need clear, clean, warm water, and the Bahamas is perfect for that.
So Bahamas is perfect for that, and you say that they develop over hundreds and thousands of years.
They do. They are very slow growing. If you ever take the time to actually look at a piece of living coral, you will see all of these small microscopic organisms that are almost nestled inside. Is because they are. They are called coral polyps, and they look like an upside down jellyfish. They have several tentacles, They're radially symmetric, so you can cut them in half and they would be the same on either side. And inside their flesh is a special algae called zooxanthellae. We call them zooks for short because it's a really long word. And they live within the tissue of the coral polyps. And it's this symbiotic relationship where, like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So the corals provide algae with a home to live in, and also carbon dioxide, because algae are photosynthetic and they need carbon dioxide to respire. And in return, the zooxanthellae provide oxygen, and they get rid of the polyps' wastes. And they also can provide another source of food for the coral polyps, which is cool.
So you're saying then that the corals actually provide oxygen?
Yes, they do, actually. They provide oxygen. No, the corals do not provide oxygen. The zooxanthellae does.
Zooxanthellae, so those
Right.
things that grow, which is what, basically an algae?
Yes.
Or is different from an algae?
Corals? Corals are an animal.
No, I mean the things that grow on the coral.
The algae that lives inside the coral.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an algae. It's a very tiny, tiny microscopic algae that lives inside the tissues of corals.
Well, so why does the coral reef allow the algae to live inside of their abode, their chambers?
It's just, like I said, it's a symbiotic
Symbiotic.
relationship. You know, I scratch your back and you scratch mine. So corals provide the algae with a home. And in return, you know, because corals are an animal, they need oxygen to respire. And, you know, it's kind of hard to do that if you don't have gills underwater. So therefore, the algae that live inside the coral's flesh provide them with the oxygen that they need.
Isn't that amazing creation?
It's fantastic.
Isn't that something that we should have ultimate respect for? The way Mother Nature, the Creator, has designed all of these things, like you said, with a symbiotic relationship.
Correct, yes. It's definitely beautiful, especially if you have the pleasure to go down and actually look at how spectacularly colorful and diverse that they are.
Have you had the experience of actually seeing the corals at nighttime?
Yes, I have. I've been on 1 or 2 night dives, and it's spectacular. That's when the corals come out of their skeletons and they feed, and they're all extended out there. And like I said, they look like upside down jellyfish.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's thousands and millions of these little tiny coral polyps out feeding and communicating and eating, and it's great.
I had that experience once or twice, diving at nighttime with just a flashlight. You know, we were actually searching for something around the coral reefs. I think it was lobster in Long Island. And that was an amazing phenomenon to see the corals, how they expand, how this beautiful animal just comes out.
Exactly. You
And
would never know. You would never know. They
no.
just look like a passive rock just
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
there, but they're really not. Those are thousands and millions of individual animals.
Okay, well, let's get right to the crux of the situation here. What significance do coral reefs have in the Bahamas specifically?
Well, globally, their main importance, I would say there are definitely so many different points that I can hit, but for this show, I'll say ecosystem services. And when I say ecosystem services, I mean benefits that humans receive from the natural environment. And for coral reefs, it would be, number one for the Bahamas would be storm protection. They provide this natural buffer or this natural barrier from massive waves that are coming in from the Atlantic Ocean. And they essentially slow them down. It would be like you coming to run towards me and I stick my foot out and trip you over, you know. That impact that you would have on me would be a whole lot less. So if coral reefs weren't there, those waves that are coming in from storms, hurricanes, surges, or anything like that could totally decimate the Bahamas if they weren't there in place to protect the land.
So would you say then that we should have this ultimate concern with respect to the preservation as much as possible of all the coral reefs around the different islands in the Bahamas?
Correct. And it's also for many more reasons, not just storm protection, because there's also food. How many fishermen do you speak to on a daily basis, Mr. Darvel?
On a daily basis?
Yes.
I run into them all the time. I go to Burger King usually 3 mornings of the week, and there
Exactly.
are a bunch of fishermen in there ready to go out fishing for that day.
Exactly. And where do they get this fish
I
from?
love them dearly because they tell me where they go and what catch they have for the day or the day before. So definitely, I'm always in contact with fishermen, and they tell me about the reefs all the time. In fact, they've talked to me about the disappearing of the habitats for example, lane snapper, that they seem to be needing to go out further and further into the deep in order to find coral reefs where the snappers habitate.
Exactly. That's because coral reefs are the home to all of these fish species. Just about every species that you can think of in the ocean has probably started or had part of their life cycle on coral reefs because it's a huge habitat for these animals.
So give me a little comparison between coral reefs and mangroves, just because you're talking about the habitat, and we know that the mangroves is a significant home for juvenile fish. Even fish go there to give birth to young, etc. So what sort of the relationship between mangroves and coral reefs?
Okay, well, I guess if you can imagine the coastline, if you went walking, you would first hit the mangroves. And the mangroves, like I said, well, not like I said, but the mangroves are the first stop, the first start of a lot of fish species life cycle, including invertebrates. So a lot of their larvae would settle in there, eggs are laid there. That's where life starts. But mangroves also act as a buffer for storm protection, but also they filter a lot of the runoff that come from the land before it gets to the coral reefs, because corals are very finicky creatures and they need clean, clear water. So without mangroves there to filter that runoff, coral reefs wouldn't be as successful.
No, there you go. So you're talking about a symbiotic relationship now between the mangroves and the coral reefs.
Correct.
An amazing creation. So then the mangroves are like the first mother that nurses these beautiful creatures, and then of course how does a young juvenile fish or crab or lobster or conch, what is, you probably never studied intelligence of the fish, maybe you have, but how do they know when they can venture forth from the protection of the mangroves to go into this beautiful panorama of coral reefs?
Well, that's really the nature of research. We really don't know a lot of these things, and it's beautiful that we don't know in a way, but then also there are theories, there are moon patterns, there are tidal patterns, temperature patterns that they just intrinsically know when to move and where to go. And then it's also learning. A lot of groupers know where to go because they've watched grouper before them, and they just kind of follow the leader and then figure it out and remember, and year after year it happens over and over again.
Another phenomenon of Mother Earth. And like you said something very critical there, and because I kind of synchronize with that too. And that is that maybe it's a good thing that we don't know, because a lot of things that we don't know, it is a good thing that we don't know, because then the knowledge of something may create another havoc in the whole habitat in which we live. And so, but the unknown, I am very happy with the unknown, because I know so much junk already. I don't need to know any more phenomenal knowledge, because I wouldn't have room for it. And so that's a good attitude to have. But before we go further, talking about the coral reefs, you are now participating in a particular project connected to, what's the name of the institute?
I currently work for the Perry Institute for Marine Science.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the Perry Institute of Marine Science.
Well, the Perry Institute was originally founded in 1970 by John H. Perry Jr., and he was instrumental in the creation of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmosphere Administration.
Really?
Yes, and in 1984, they actually created a Caribbean Marine Research Center in Exuma. So usually when people think of Perry Marine Institute, they think about this lab that was created in Exuma. But it was designated as one of the 6 national undersea research centers under the auspices of NOAA, NOAA, and was one of the most productive marine labs in the world until its closing in 2012. However, we now have adapted from this site-based research facility to more of a program-based institution, and we conduct research throughout the Bahamas and other parts of the Caribbean in partnership with governments and international non-governmental organizations and local organizations throughout the entire region. And we also support global research as well. The director, Dr. Craig Dahlgren, actually just came from Curacao doing a wonderful workshop on coral reef restoration. And it's a great organization. And over the past 10 years, we've led numerous assessments on Bahamian coral reefs, resulting in the designation and evaluation of various protected areas, including the West Side Andros National Park. Have you been there yet?
I haven't. That's on my bucket list.
Yes,
not that I
it
plan to die
definitely
soon,
is.
but every week I'm adding something to my bucket list.
But we do coral reef and mangrove restoration and rehabilitation projects. And in several parts of the Bahamas, not just the main islands that you hear about over and over and over again. It's throughout the Bahamas. And we've done all of this in partnership with the Bahamas National Trust, the Atlantis Blue Project, and many other organizations like the Nature Conservancy. And we've led several studies of key fishery species like the Nassau grouper, and we're developing and other developing fisheries like sea cucumbers in Andros.
How did you become so fortunate to get hooked up with the Perry Institute?
Well, I kind of did my life backwards, I suppose. I did not go straight to college after high school. Like you mentioned earlier,
that, yeah.
I was a BESS scholar, Bahamas Environmental Steward Scholar, through BREEF, the Bahamas Reef Environmental Educational Foundation. And basically that was a full semester at the island school, full scholarship, and then a 6-month internship at the Cape Eleuthera Institute. I grew up next door to David Rose, obviously the brother Ben Rose and all of those guys. I grew up next door to them.
Right out here in Queens Cove.
Yes,
yeah,
right in Queens
here's a
Cove.
young lady from Queens Cove, definitely.
Yes, that's where I grew up. And naturally, I grew up with his kids, and we would go out, and he fished conch and lobster, and we would do that every day. And it was just fun to me. So I naturally had a passion, along with my father being a biology teacher, so it was kind of reinforced at home, like exactly what I was doing and the animals I was learning about. But then I went to the island school, and my passion was given a direction. I felt as though I was now empowered with all of this knowledge, and I felt as though it was my responsibility to tell other people. And then I did my internship at the Cape Eleuthera Institute, and I studied sharks. And my now directed passion was revealed to be a career. And I'm like, I can do this forever. This is crazy. I need to figure out how I can keep doing this and how I can keep, instilling an awe of nature in my fellow Bahamians.
Oh my God, that's a mission, and I can vouch that going forward in this country, particularly in reference to climate change, sea level rise, etc., we definitely are going to attract more people, young people like you, into the environment expression to our people and how they should respect all of these phenomenal aspects of Mother Earth. And at this point, I would like to just mention that her father is Mr. Alan Vellacott, and he is a biology teacher at 8 Mile Rock High School.
He's now retired, but yes,
he's
worked
retired. Hey,
yes.
He didn't tell me that. I thought I see him often at Bellevue in the morning, and it's like after 9 o'clock, and I didn't want to insult him. And I said, well, how come you're not in school, Alan? And so it was by running into him at Bellevue that he told me you were going to be here on the island. I said, oh my God, I'd get her on my radio program. And so I thank you, Alan. I'm sure you're listening to your daughter this afternoon.
Hi, Dad.
Yeah, you can say hi, Daddy. Okay, this is good. We're going to take a short break. We're going to hear our ad of, we got one ad coming up about, what you call it, splash. Waterkeeper. Yeah, Waterkeeper's ad. Yeah, please. Okay, we'll be right back. You listen to Voice of the Bays. The Environment Speaks, and we have a beautiful, intelligent, scientific young lady, Alana Vellacott, in the studio this afternoon. So stay tuned. We have a couple Father's Day gifts that we're going to give away after we can decide what questions we're going to ask. Okay, Avery.
Bahamas, let your voices blaze.
Bahamas, your Save the Bays team is live on air once a week to give you your environmental update on your country, our beautiful Bahama land. Join us on Voice of the Bays radio show each Wednesday on Love 97 from 5 to 6 p.m. to hear the latest news on our 700 islands in the sun. Call in and let your voice be heard during the show. Calling from Nassau, dial 326-8255. Calling in from Freeport, use 351-6175. You can also listen to the show streaming online.
Corporate groups, schools, swim club, social, and civic organization. Let's take fun to the water at the first ever Splash Mania Kayak Race, Saturday, July 8th at Monterey Restaurant in Williamstown. Hosted by Waterkeepers Bahamas. Win awesome prizes or cash. There's a race for all ages, individual and relay races. Will your team have what it takes to get your kayak to the finish line? Let's see Saturday, July 8th at Monterey Restaurant from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Proceeds towards swimmable, fishable, drinkable, water-based activities for all. Visit Waterkeepers Bahamas on Facebook for more details.
Well, great God Almighty, where you going in that frilly bandit?
I get one of these for you too.
I ain't wearing no tutu for nobody.
Just get elastic in the waist. Listen, we ain't got nothing to do on weekends, right? So I figure we could get us a little gig as the Super Wash cheerleaders.
What you know about cheerleading?
Ain't nothing to it. You never watch football, eh?
I know one thing. You ain't climbing up on my shoulder, especially with that little short skirt.
The plan is for us to visit every Super Wash a weekend. All we can do is jump around, little piece, kick up your leg, and wave your pom-pom.
I ain't no puppy show. I ain't kicking up my leg for nobody. The last time I do that, I pull every muscle from my neck to my toe, and I was 20.
Believe me, when the eye girl see this, he won't believe his eyes.
Yeah, he won't be the only one. Super Wash, they washes your process, it cleans you 24/7.
It's time to take a break from your routine. Free your mind. Breathe deeply. Fill your body with energy. And fill your glass with Coca-Cola. 0 sugar, 0 calories. Ah, Coca-Cola. Taste the feeling.
Welcome back to Voice of the Bays, Environment Speaks, and we have an exciting program this afternoon talking about coral reefs with an expert, a biologist, marine biologist, scientist, very much she is. She's had so many experiences in the water, the ocean, and she could tell us so much about the value of our coral reefs. And let's get right to that. And you could call us at 351-6176 in Freeport if you want to add to the program this afternoon or ask a question, or in Nassau, 326-8255. And I have two Father's Day gifts here, $25 gift certificates from Monterey Village for Father's Day for lunch or dinner. And we'll come with some questions to ask, and whoever has the answer, we'll win one of those. But let's get right back to Alana, because she's such a resourceful person in terms of what we should know about our coral reefs and the purpose that they serve. But let's get to the condition of coral reefs in the Bahamas generally.
Right. Well, first of all, like I said, before we talk about the status, coral reefs are extremely important to the Bahamas and especially to other coastal nations because of their ecosystem services, like I explained earlier. I just touched on storm protection, but also there's food production. We get all of our fish from these coral reefs because that's where they make their home. There's tourism, and we generate at least 25 times more money through tourism than we do through fisheries, and that's just tourism. Also, they produce sand and also scientific research and medicine, and they provide millions of people with food and medicine and protection from storms. They're just totally invaluable. You cannot put a price on them. But their status currently in the Bahamas from 2011 to 2013, the Perry Institute and other organizations that we are in partnership with assessed 214 reefs throughout the Bahamas. And they included sites like the Key Sal Bank, Andros, the Southern Bahamas, New Providence, the Little Bahama Bank, which is where Abaco and Grand Bahama is nestled in, and some surveys in the Exuma Keys and Berry Islands throughout the Bahamas. And the health of these reefs, they were determined by conducting coral reef surveys. There would be 3 teams. One would survey the corals, one would survey the fish, and one would survey the benthic or the bottom community, which can include corals, algae, macroinvertebrates, anything that you could find on the bottom. And for each indicator, reef health was given a score of good, fair, impaired, or poor. And there was an overall score that we calculated by averaging the scores of these individual indicators. And So throughout these years and all of those surveys, Bahamian reefs were classified as impaired overall. However, there was a lot of variability among these sites and other reef zones, and we found that live coral cover was lower on Bahamian reefs than reefs in the rest of the Caribbean, which is good for the Bahamas, not so great for the Caribbean, but good for us. And macroalgae coverage was relatively high. So macroalgae, like I said, zooxanthellae lives inside the flesh of the coral polyp, so that means they're micro, you can't see them, but macroalgae is the seaweed that you can see, like the bigger, fleshier pieces. And reef structure was rated as fair for most areas.
Before you go ahead, what is the purpose of the larger, the macro algae? Are they serving a purpose for the coral, or are they damaging the coral?
They definitely do serve a purpose for the coral, because when corals are very small, we call them coral recruits. When they finally settle onto a hard surface, they can provide coverage or protection from corallivores or animals that eat coral, like parrotfish and maybe small butterfly fish. They do provide protection in that sense, but then of course they can overgrow a reef very quickly if the herbivores are not in place, or if there is a flux of nutrients that should not be in that area.
So which are the herbivores who would feed on them to keep the corals healthy?
That would be
like parrotfish, et cetera?
Yeah, parrotfish, damselfish, butterfly fish.
Turbots?
Yeah, those two, they are around, and they help diadema antillarum. So that would be your long-spined sea urchins. Have you ever gone diving and you've seen these really long-spined sea urchins?
Yeah, I've run into them a couple times.
They are very important.
Yeah.
They also help to keep the algae under control.
Okay, I intercepted it just to get a clarification on the algae and the micro and the macro. So continue with what you were saying about the health of coral reefs in the Bahamas.
Right, and I touched on parrotfish just now, and they're actually very important to coral reefs because, like I said, they help to control the amount of macroalgae that could potentially swallow a coral reef just by overgrowing the reef. And parrotfish populations were scored as fair in most areas, which is 2 to 4 times greater than the rest of the Caribbean. So, like I said, the Bahamas is doing fairly okay in terms of relating it to the Caribbean, but we still are scored as impaired overall. Now, that is not a doom and gloom story. You know, that is not the end of the line. We are still working hard, and we are still serving more and more reefs and surveying them more consistently so that we can have a much better idea of the overall status of Bahamian coral reefs.
Oh man, that's so much glorious and beautiful information. So when you've looked at the coral reefs along so many different, a number of, how many you said, about 5 different vicinities in the archipelagic nation of the Bahamas?
No, actually 214 coral reefs.
214?
Yes, that's how many we assessed.
Oh, 214.
Yes, in the Bahamas.
But I mean, along how many islands?
I would say about, I haven't been on them all, so I can't say from memory, but I would say at least 10. There's Key Salbank, Andros, the Southern Bahamas, New Providence. Yeah, so I'd say about 10 that I can name off the top of my head.
And if you could say which areas you found to be more vibrant or more healthy?
Like I said, I've only just joined the organization, and because I'm still a student, I only am able to participate in these surveys on a seasonal basis, so during the summers. But a while ago, if you remember, do you remember the Khalid bin Sultan Living Oceans Foundation?
Yes, yeah.
Massive boat that came to the Bahamas and embarked on a 5-year coral reef survey expedition. I was on a few of them. And I did have a great time in the Key Salbank. It was really pretty. However, number one was the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park. Obviously it's because it's a park, and that just goes to show you how well protected areas work. It is gorgeous. Conch die of old age. Of old age.
Don't go down and get those old conch now. You know, even they're going to die. They have a purpose to serve.
They die of old age in the Exuma Keys. Groupers as big as me. I'm a very small person, but I would be a very big grouper.
Well, that's wonderful. And what is the worst place you've seen in terms of degradation of coral reefs?
I cannot exactly pinpoint one island, firstly because that's unfair, and a lot of islands have their own dynamics. Some islands are more prone to damage through land development. Some are poached more heavily than others, so I can't necessarily say the worst reef that I've ever been to, but it's usually in an area where close by there has been development, or if the area is known to be poached on a regular basis.
So I know you're young, but I mean you're extremely intelligent and informed. And what would you put out there in terms of how development, particularly along the coastal area of our islands, should be sensitive to mangroves, coral reefs, and so on?
Well, I mean, development, with development, there comes a lot of runoff. And say, for example, a channel, dredging channels obviously has a huge impact on the footprint. However, it's really the silt from dredging that causes this problem on coastal areas where there is development, and it removes vegetation and increases sediment in these areas, and that can kill many species of coral. So I guess number one would be, the basic thing that you should do if you're doing coastal development is to set up silt screens. They stop all of this sediment that is in the runoff coming from the development. They prevent them from getting into the mangroves or getting into the waterways or getting onto the coral reefs, which can choke and suffocate corals.
At this point, Alana, just allow me to make an observation.
Sure.
Just about 10 days ago, a colleague and myself, we were down in Bimini. And when you go, if you've seen Bimini, say 20 or 30 years ago, and you go back now, you would literally cry in terms of the destruction which has taken place there. Rishima, Alignab, and myself were there, and we saw the damage being done to the Bimini Bay area from the sediment from dredging, and they're pushing fill all the way with garbage upon these huge, magnificent mangroves. So we know exactly what you're talking about. And the fish, they panic. The little lemon sharks and other marine life, they don't know what's happening to their particular environment. And it's sacrilegious. It's raping of our environment, which has taken place in North Bimini, in the mangroves area. As a matter of fact, on Thursday evening, we have a meeting in Bimini to bring very dramatically to the attention to people who are destroying that magnificent little island that they cannot continue to do this. It is raping, pillaging. It's a savage way to go about development. When they came there initially, they devastated immediately 163 acres of prime mangroves, replenished with every species, over 100 species of marine life. From conch to lobster to lemon sharks to grouper, to every species you can imagine. And like you said before, it is the primary area where they gain their existence, and then they move out by nature out into the coral reefs, etc. And so we got to stop this pillage and this rape of our environment. And then, of course, on the western side, but you talked about the sediment that goes out and kills the reefs, and we've seen that too. I dove around the Three Sisters about 2 years before they built this 1,000-foot dock, and it was unbelievable. And every type of coral reef live and replenished with fish. You go there now, the coral reefs are dead, and the dock sits there unused. We have a caller on the line. We'll take the caller now. Go ahead. You're on the Voice of the Bays. He's still on, Avery? Okay. All right. Call back right away, and we'll take your call, please. Okay. So let's continue a little bit about the necessity to safeguard these marine ecosystems that are so necessary for our islands.
Right. So I just spoke about the status of Bahamian coral reefs, and these we can clearly see some of the impacts or some of the negative impacts that have been created on these coral reefs. And these key threats are coastal development, illegal fishing, legal but unsustainable fishing, and of course, climate change. And to combat these threats, there are specific strategies that can be implemented to put Bahamian reefs back on the path to being vibrant ecosystems, teeming with marine life and supporting the lives of Bahamians. And these strategies would include creating island development plans to prevent degradation of sensitive habitats, like what we were talking about, the silt screens, and making sure that when a development comes in, there is a certain amount of prevention as well as mitigation in place, and improving fisheries management through better enforcement and revising regulations so that they're based on the best available science, not science from 10, 12 years ago that probably is not relevant now. And also implementing a network of marine protected areas. I'm a big fan of MPAs.
Alana, hold it right there. Let's
Sure.
take the caller. Go ahead. You want to voice of the base?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Go ahead.
Great. Welcome to you, sir, and your guests. I'd just like you to address the problem of what is the most, or what man-made behavior is the most deleterious to our reefs, and how can Bahamians better police and guard against damage or the destruction you spoke of to our wetlands. I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, thank you very kindly for your call. Go ahead, Alana.
Well, like I said, the main threats that I spoke about earlier were coastal development, illegal fishing, legal but unsustainable fishing, which I can talk about, and climate change. So for a regular civilian, I suppose it's definitely preventing pollution would be one of the big ones that you can do on a daily basis, even by just going to the store, like single-use plastics, trying to eliminate single-use plastics from your everyday life. So using the canvas bags that are available at any NGO. The Bahamas National Trust has them. The Nature Conservancy has them. Even Solomon's has their own reusable bags that you can use. And then if you're at the beach and you're having a good time, remember to put your garbage in an actual receptacle and not just leave it there for someone else or for whoever to clean the beach to come and pick up. Also things like if you go fishing, don't use chemicals and bleach when you go fishing. I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but it really is not. Just because you want to get this one fish that's stuck under a reef, or, there could be a lot of fish under this reef, let me throw bleach all over it. That's not going to make any sense. You're going to destroy that little habitat for all of those fish to use in the future. And if you're a boater, don't anchor on coral reefs. Anchor in the sand. They have sand anchors that you can use. They work really, really well. If you're nervous, go down, snorkel, stuff it in the sand yourself. But do not anchor on coral reefs. It's not just the anchor that causes the damage. It's also the chain that's connected between the anchor and the rope for your anchor. It's going to bang on the coral reef for the duration that you're anchored there. Use moorings instead of using an anchor. There are many moorings here in Grand Bahama. There are many moorings in New Providence. Talk to your local dive operators. Talk to the Bahamas National Trust to find out where these moorings are. And usually the moorings are on good sites that you'd want to go and snorkel and see. And also don't contribute to the problem of invasive species. And I don't just mean lionfish, I mean plants as well. We need our coastal plants to hold the sand and sediment in place on our beaches, to keep our beaches and not rocky areas. And that also includes, not releasing unwanted pets into the wild and stuff like that. Don't set Sparky free. Keep him as a pet. You can also affect the rate of climate change just by conserving energy. Switch from your compact fluorescent to, which way does it go? Switch to the curly light bulbs. That's the way I remember it. Switch to the curly light bulbs instead of using the round ones that you use every day. It's not only great for the environment, it's also healthy for your wallet as well. Even though they're expensive to buy initially, they can definitely reduce the price of your power bill every month, and encourage the use of alternative renewable energy sources as well.
Okay, good. A whole list of possibilities and, well, actions that individuals can take. You mentioned something, and I'm very curious about it. You talked about legal but unsustainable fishing. Give us an idea of what you mean by that.
Okay, so say, for example, you're a fisherman, and to sustain your house, to pay for little Susie to go to school and all of these things, you're a fisherman. You need to bring in at least X amount of tails, say during the season, because you're a responsible fisherman and you fish during the open season, correct? As I hope everyone should. To not kind of go over your quota just because you see it doesn't mean you need to spear it right away. And also obeying fishery regulations. It's 5.5 inches. It's not 5. It's not 4 3/4. It's 5.5 inches. So size really does matter in this case. Haha, that's a joke. And also picking up conch that are able to reproduce. So they must have a flared lip, and not just a flared lip, but also a thicker one at that, one that's about the thickness of a penny. I know you have a lot of pennies around. VAT is a thing. You have pennies. Take a penny with you when you go fishing. Match the penny up against the conch's lip to make sure that it has that thickness to it.
What beautiful information. We're going to take a break right here, and when you come back, I'm going to ask a question because I have these 2 gift certificates to give away this afternoon from Monterey Village. Out of Nassau, 326-8255. If you want to contribute to this amazing discussion, informative discussion on coral reefs and what their purpose, what are their purposes in our Bahamian waters. And in Freeport, 351-6176. My esteemed guest this afternoon, Miss Alana Vellicott, who has a plethora of experience and knowledge about every aspect of our ocean, coral reefs, mangroves, etc. We're going to take a short break and be right back to Voice of the Bays.
Bahamas, let your voices blaze.
Bahamas, your Save the Bays team is live on air once a week to give you your environmental update on your country, our beautiful Bahama land. Join us on Voice of the Bays radio show each Wednesday on Love 97 from 5 to 6 p.m. to hear the latest news on our 700 islands in the sun. Call in and let your voice be heard during the show. Calling from Nassau, dial 326-8255. Calling in from Freeport, use 351-6175. You can also listen to the show streaming online.
Corporate groups, schools, swim clubs, social, and civic organization. Let's take fun to the water at the first ever Splash Mania Kayak Race, Saturday, July 8th at Monterey Restaurant in Williamstown. Hosted by Waterkeepers Bahamas. Win awesome prizes or cash. There's a race for all ages, individual and relay races. Will your team have what it takes to get your kayak to the finish line? Let's see Saturday, July 8th at Monterey Restaurant from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Proceeds towards swimmable, fishable, drinkable, water-based activities for all. Visit Waterkeepers Bahamas on Facebook for more details.
We're neighbors. NUA Insurance now serves the Carmichael community with our newest service center on Carmichael Road, located just east of Bahamas Faith Ministries. Let us give you a hand choosing the coverage you need from our complete line of home, auto, and business policies. With locations in Collins Avenue, Harbor Bay, Carmichael Road, as well as Georgetown, Exuma, NUA Insurance is the most convenient choice for all your insurance needs. Call us today, 302-9100, for friendly professional advice. NUA Insurance, the hands-on insurance agency.
Welcome back to Voice of the Bays, Environment Speaks. And our topic this afternoon is the importance of the magnificent coral reefs to the archipelagic nation of the Bahamas, which has an expansive water area of 100,000 about square miles of water. So you can imagine the number of reefs there are and the amount of fish that actually come from those reefs or feed on those reefs. And one of the questions I'm going to ask in a little while is Alana mentioned the number of reefs that they have actually interacted with, and I'm going to ask that number in a short while. And if you could answer that question, call in at 351. Nassau, I can't get this gift certificate to you, so it'll be eligible for free photos only. 351-6176 if you have the answer. Alana, a lot more information. Tell us more about our coral reefs.
Sure. So this whole summer, I'm actually the summer intern for the Perry Institute for Marine Science, and it has been an absolute whirlwind so far. I have worked with the Institute doing coral and fish surveys, namely coral surveys. It's a particular type of survey. It's called AGRA. And what it is, it's a rapid assessment of these coral reefs on 3 different levels. There's a team that goes down and lays out a transect and identifies and records the length, width, and height of each coral that is on that 10-meter transect. And that's what I do. And I'm basically vertical the whole time because corals don't move, they stay in one spot. And I'm writing down the scientific name and recording the length, width, and height of each coral. And then there's a fish team that identifies and counts, but more so gives an estimate. It's kind of impossible to count each fish species you encounter on a coral reef. And then there's the benthic team, right? So we did all of these surveys. And earlier you were asking me, how can we protect our coral reefs? And the Perry Institute for Marine Science currently is engaging in this project that's been funded by many different organizations, which I'll talk about soon. And it's called Reverse the Decline. And it's basically rehabilitating critical ecosystems and facilitating recovery of key species on these coral reefs. And we're working on establishing a Bahamas Reef Rescue Network, where we are working with local partners to establish nurseries and do reef restoration, where we will provide technical support and some material cost and monitoring and training local partners, and we will manage coral nurseries and eventually take cuttings from the corals growing in those nurseries and plant, I say that in quotes because they're not plants, they're animals, but plant them back onto the reefs. And when I say coral nursery, if you can imagine a Christmas tree, and of course you hang ornaments on a Christmas tree, but the ornaments in this case would be the actual smaller cuttings of coral reefs. And so it's in the shape of a tree, and you can hang about 55 centimeter pieces on this tree that's floating in the water, and they grow. And in about 2 years, from that 5 centimeter piece that we've grown, we can plant probably about 4 smaller pieces from that one piece in about 2 years' time. And considering each tree has 50 smaller pieces, and we plant at least 4, we establish at least 4 trees in a site, that can be a lot of corals in just a very short space of time.
Okay, sorry to interrupt because, I'm mesmerized with all this information you're giving, but we have a caller on the line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm calling to answer the question that you asked about how many reefs there are.
Yeah, how many?
214.
You're correct. You won the, you have a father or a husband?
Yes.
Okay, so you won a gift certificate at Manta Ray for dinner on Father's Day. So you can pick it up at Love 97 office tomorrow. Pardon me? The name. Give your name. You want to give your name over the air, or you want to give it to the operator?
I'll give it to the operator.
Okay, then. So stay on the line and he'll answer you, okay?
Okay.
And thank you for calling. Very happy you're listening. So much good information. Continue, Alana.
Yes, we have surveyed 214 reefs total in the Bahamas so far. But like I was saying, we create coral nurseries. Now
those reefs are not just one little rock, is it? That's a whole kind of outlaying, expansive reef, right?
Correct. Okay. So 214 different sites.
Yeah.
Throughout the Bahamas, which are coral reefs. Now, coral reef, there are different kinds. You can have patch reefs where it's one coral head here, and then 5 meters over, there's another one and another one. We can also survey those, but it's 214 different sites.
Okay, excuse me, because I want to ask this one question later on. How many types of coral do we have in the Bahamas?
Wow,
that you know of.
I really couldn't tell you an exact answer, but coral reefs are home, obviously, to just a plethora of different types of coral reefs. I have to know each scientific name.
So it's not the brain coral and the staghorn?
Yes, yes, you do have Yes, you do have common names. I can maybe
Fire
name
coral.
10 or maybe 20
That many?
common names,
You
but scientific
serious?
names, I would bore you with that, and this radio show would last quite a while.
Okay, all right. So we got a lot of them. Isn't that
Yes.
absolutely amazing? Because people
Yes.
think there are only about a half a dozen different types of coral.
No. There are definitely hundreds of different types of species of coral.
And we have hundreds of them in our ocean.
I would say yes, because I'm hopeful.
That you would see that many. Okay, so much good information, Alana. Go ahead, please. Continue.
Right. So what I was talking about is that we're establishing coral nurseries, so places where we can take small cuttings, which you need a permit to do. Please don't do this at home. We can take small cuttings of specific species of corals, ones that are critically endangered in the Bahamas, but that also provide essential habitat for this fish, for the fish species that we love to eat, the crawfish, the grouper, the snapper, all of those. And they are, I know both the scientific name and the common names, but their common names are staghorn coral and elkhorn coral and branching finger coral as well.
Those are the ones that are in danger?
Yes, the first two, staghorn coral and elkhorn coral, are endangered in the Bahamas. Their numbers are significantly lower than a lot of the other corals in the Bahamas, and there really aren't that many living colonies that we know left in the Bahamas.
Why is it that they are more in danger than the others?
Some corals are just way more susceptible to certain impacts, like I talked about, development, excess nutrients in the water, also ocean temperature and ocean acidification. I can't necessarily tell you that right now because I'm still studying, but they are definitely more prone to these impacts.
So just again to interrupt, acidification in the ocean, what brings that about? What is the reason for that? And the warming of the ocean, those two.
Well, I'm not an expert on that per se, but the oceans are the largest carbon sink in the world and therefore can absorb a lot of carbon dioxide. And with there being more carbon dioxide in the air, there is more carbon dioxide in the oceans, making the ocean a bit more acidic. Exactly. And what happens when you pour acid on calcium carbonate, or limestone is the common name for calcium carbonate. It dissolves. And of course, the coral skeleton, what they secrete, the actual structure that they live in, is calcium carbonate. And so that can dissolve.
So this is what we call coral bleaching then? That term?
Yes,
explain that term,
it can.
coral bleaching.
Coral bleaching doesn't necessarily mean the coral is dead. So coral bleaching is when a coral polyp is stressed. And not stressed like, oh my God, I didn't finish my homework, what am I going to do? Stressed like the water is too warm for too long of a period of time, or there's too much sediment in the water, or things like that, things that would quote unquote stress a coral. And it could be any of those things. And what happens is it spits out the algae that lives within its tissue. And of course, like I said earlier, the algae is what gives corals its brilliant color. And when it expels the algae, it turns white because it no longer has a color. So it could be a stressed coral. Is coral bleaching? There was a massive coral bleaching event where corals spit out their zooxanthellae, and they could get their algae, the zooxanthellae, back into their flesh. However, it depends on how long that stress lasts for. So if there's too much sediment for too long, that coral would not accept another the algae back into its flesh. Or if the water is too warm for too long, the same thing can happen, and then the coral dies.
Okay, before we do run out of time, there's something you had mentioned about, we got 5 minutes, the coral tree, and when you plant, you hang the little bits of coral from the string, on the string. How does those little coral, what do they feed on? What do they garner from the ocean to allow them to grow and to expand?
Well, I mean, I can't necessarily...
But I mean, do they get nutrients of some sort from the ocean?
Yes, correct. But the whole point of coral nurseries is to grow these corals so that later, in about maybe 2 years' time, we can take cuttings of the corals that are growing in the nurseries and plant them back onto the reef to bring the reef back to its original splendor, to bring the fish back onto those reefs, to replenish what we've lost through those threats that I spoke on earlier.
So if a reef is bleaching, or like you explained it scientifically, do you take these bits of coral back to those same reefs then to replenish them?
No, we don't take the bleaching corals. We look for healthy
No,
colonies
I
of
mean, do you
corals.
take the ones that you've grown? Do you take them back to a reef that may have been bleaching to plant them, replant them?
I don't exactly understand.
No, I mean,
your
you're
question.
growing them on a tree.
Yes.
And then you're going to take them, you're going to transplant them back on a reef.
Yes.
Do you plant them back on a healthy reef, or you try to?
Oh, I understand.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
no, we are looking for reefs that are at least frequented by people so that, they can see our efforts. But yes, we're looking for reefs that have been damaged. For an example, a few weeks ago, we were out at Stewart Coves, and there is a world-renowned reef called Pumpkin Patch. And since Hurricane Matthew, it's unrecognizable. These tall structures that have grown for thousands of years have been turned over on its side. They've been toppled. So we have transplanted reefs from coral nurseries that we've grown out at Stewart Coves and at Atlantis onto that reef.
Okay, but I want you to continue on that, but I want to give out the question for the second gift certificate from Manta Ray Village. And that is very simple question. Is coral a plant or an animal? Coral a plant or an animal? Call in at, I want to give them a little easy one, 351-6176. Continue, give us more information, Alana. This is so powerful this afternoon, knowing all of this information, sharing it with our environmentally conscious Bahamian people now.
Thank you. And so New Providence is not the only place that has a coral nursery. We have a total of 9 different coral nurseries.
Okay, we got someone on the line. Go ahead.
Yeah, the coral is an animal.
An animal. Okay, great. You're okay. Stay on the line and give your name to our conductor in the booth here.
Okay.
You
want me to hold on and speak to the operator?
Yeah. Speak to him, and he'll get your name and tell you when to come and get your certificate for Father's Day dinner at Manta Ray Village. Okay.
Where's that? Where's Manta Ray Village?
Oh my Lord! Listen, I got to advertise one of the best places, New Brand once. It's out on the beach area. Our director in the studio will tell you. Okay.
Okay.
All right, and they sponsor our program as well. They're wonderful people. Our food is good. I've gone there many times. Alana, we just have a couple minutes. Give us some more relevant information. This is so good. And I plan to rerun this program, by the way, because this is stuff that all Bahamians should know.
We should break it up into different segments.
Exactly, because I could have you back here when you do more of your research on the reefs with the Perry Institute and so on. Okay, go ahead.
Right. Like I was saying, there are many different coral nurseries throughout the Bahamas. Total, there are 9. And coincidentally, I just finished establishing one in the Fowl Keys National Park in Abaco.
Fowl Keys?
Yes, sir. The Fowl Keys National Park.
Why do you call them Fowl Keys?
I'm not completely sure, but I know it's fowl the chicken and not fowl the stench. But I just came from establishing
you have
one
a foul reef too, when you devastate a reef, they call it fouled up the reef.
Gosh, no, it's a beautiful reef.
Okay, we got it tied up. Just say again what the Bahamians should do to protect their reefs. Like, don't anchor on the coral reefs.
Right, don't anchor on coral reefs. Don't use bleach or any kind of chemicals when you're fishing. But also, I'd like to thank our partners with the Perry Institute for Marine Science for making all of these projects possible. The Disney Conservation Fund, the Nature Conservancy, Atlantis Blue Project, Cape Eleuthera Institute, Stewart Coves Dive Bahamas, Small Hope Bay Lodge in Andros, Science Under Sail, Brief, the Bahamas National Trust, of course, the Eleuthera Harbor Conservation Partnership. You all have been wonderful. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Alana, and we'll have you back because there's so much more information we have to know to inform our people. Thank you, Avery, for wonderful guidance here in the show. You've been listening to Voice of the Bay's Environment Speaks, and we'll be back next week, Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Thank you very kindly, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you.